for celebrating National Poetry Month, which is in fact 25 years old. And the Poem in Your Pocket Day is started in 2008 or 2009. I'm sharing the day with, sharing the month with the Ossining Children's Center, and it's just a great gift to always be reminded to keep learning and see with fresh eyes again, and suspend the belief of judging one's own art, which children don't necessarily do. They just sort of enthusiastically go at it, which is wonderful. And it's been a great awareness of poetry throughout this entire year, as it's been used more or less as a healing art form. I've always used poetry as an inspiration for me as an editor and as a creative director. And I first learned about Neruda in school, mostly from his romantic poetry. But then a very amazing thing happened to me. I found myself working for Amnesty International and taking a class with a guy by the name of Fernando Flores, who was Chilean. And he was the Minister of Finance under Allende in Chile. Then a military dictator took over, a guy by the name of Pinochet. And he was really very difficult. He violated human rights. He canceled elections. Sounds a little familiar. He constrained the press, but he did preside over an economic recovery. So he received some kudos from some places, but he was really a dictator in the full sense of the word. And he and Neruda had a very difficult and antagonistic relationship. And I learned about that through my teacher, Fernando Flores. Flores, who also knew Neruda, was imprisoned in Chile for 3 years. And through the work of Amnesty International, as I mentioned earlier, he was released into the hands of Stanford University. And that's where I got to know Flores, because I took one of the first internet courses ever given. I am going back about 30 years. And I learned that Neruda, I got very familiar with Neruda's work, and especially his 24 poems about ordinary things, because this was the kind of artwork that I always looked toward, the still life, the ordinary things in life. Neruda wrote about tables and chairs and beds and French fries and tomatoes and just everyday things that you could look at. But the one that especially meant a lot to me was the one about the chair, because, and this is a little bit sort of jumping from one place to another. As a student, as I would sit there and listen, I would end up doodling and drawing in the margins. I don't know if anyone else here used to draw in the margins of their notebooks, but I would draw everything that I would see in the room, the people, the pencils, the chairs, the desks, everything in the room, I would doodle in there. And the chair became a great symbol for me, and like a metaphor that I've used in all of my work. The chair was one that was always, always present. This year, unfortunately, we've had, I think it's about 560,000 empty chairs this year because of COVID, and a lot has been written about that and all of those empty chairs. But the people from Chile have a great tradition of poetry. And in fact, one of the great Chilean poets, a woman by the name of Gabriela Mistral, won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1948. So it was extraordinary for a woman to win this prize. It was also extraordinary for someone from South America to win this prize as well. Neruda won the prize in 1971 for his work. And although we mostly know a lot about his poetry, his romantic poetry, he also wrote a lot of significant things that had to do with peace. And the thing that he wrote about the chair was that when you see a chair in the middle of all the turmoil, it is the first sign of peace, which I think we all hope for in our lives. I hope, given the diplomat that he was, that it was peace also for the individual as well as for the country. And with that, I want to take you on what I call a survey of the chair in various aspects, because the chair has found its way into literature, it's found its way into the theater, it's found its way into painting, it's found its way into music as a symbol or as a metaphor for other things in our life. I just want to, Jill Kiefer, who's on this call, on this Zoom call, will be giving a wonderful lecture on Friday at 7:30 about painters and poets and writers and such. So there's always been a collaborative nature with a lot of this work. And so we'll begin. The chair, and I'm going to just go to the first slide. The chair presents us with so many decisions that we have to make when we walk into a room or a restaurant or wherever we're going. Is where are you going to sit? And were you one of the kids that sat in the first row, or were you in the back, or did you need to be on the edge, on the aisle? So it's the chairs really had us thinking about where we want to position ourselves, literally position ourselves. And that chairs actually do matter where they are, where you are in them. And we're going to look at a couple of these aspects of this. A chair is technically defined as a movable seat that has a back. That's what the definition of a chair is. For us today, I'm going to be a little bit more forgiving, and some chairs may in fact not move. But we'll take a look at that. The Egyptians first used the chair in their iconography and their hieroglyphics dating back about 3,000 years ago. And you can see, obviously, somebody of importance sitting there on the chair. The Egyptians also, by the way, were the people who invented the folding chair for their various campaigns around the world, and we'll see that soon. So the chair was constructing an artificial place to sit, as opposed to sitting in nature on a tree stump or on the ground, and it elevated us above the animal world. This was one of the things that chairs began to do. We begin to look at chairs from their religious point of view. And chair, the Latin root for the word chair is cathedra. So the seat of the bishop literally is the cathedral. And that's part of the ontology of that word. Because I spent a lot of time in the fashion business, I always sort of related to this picture of Meryl Streep playing the editor and sitting in a chair, although her subordinate is standing. But it's a very interesting power play, because chairs actually do represent a lot of power. And this is from, if you remember, The Devil Wears Prada, that movie. These were the two editors that have often been found themselves in film. Deanna Vreeland is the editor on the left in black and white, and Anna Winter on the right side of your screen, who always sits in, what she's sitting in is a metal military chair. And Deanna Vreeland is sitting on the edge of her chair because she never actually did sit down. So part of owning a chair is who sat in that chair before they sat in the chair. Now, chairs are really hard to design because all bodies are different. But we, today, they're very, very adjustable, seeking to make a difference and to fill your body positions. And we all, you know, we could lift the chair, we could lift the arms, we could adjust the back, we can refoam the seat. So chairs have actually taken on a different design look. And this is one to illustrate a sense of power and presence. You have the desk as the barrier, and you have the chair sitting behind it in a very imposing way. And we're going to look at where chairs appear in the proximity to power. Clearly the classroom, when I was a classroom teacher at Sheepshead Bay High School in Brooklyn, I used to teach from the back of the room because I always wanted my kids to go to the front of the room to use the board. And I wanted to be part of the class and for them to become the teacher, because I always believed that people actually, you can present the information, but people actually do teach themselves what they want to learn. So I would always sort of sit in the back in that. Some people in meetings like to sit in the front of the room. I always thought it was interesting that Trump sat in the middle of the table. But here we have the versions of, I'm going to show you a couple versions of the round table. This is one where the king is separated. I like the idea. This is a cartoon version, obviously, you could see that. But and he's somewhat elevated. And then you have the round table with the king at the table, but again, sort of highlighted in a unique way. Here is the Seder table with Obama. Notice former President Obama is in the middle of the table, being much more a part of the community and allowing the ritual to take place at, all around the reading of it. And these are two interesting pictures of Christ at the Last Supper. He obviously been painted many, many times, this picture, and you have him at the front of the table, and then you have him at the middle of the table. Depending upon the sense of authority and leadership, you'll see the empty seat in the one above, the Siege Perilous, which is the right hand of Christ. Often there's the empty chair and cup in the Jewish ceremony of the Passover service. This is one diagram to illustrate, as they do in sort of office corporate situations, where people can sit in terms of, these are two power seats, either head or the middle of either side of a table, in terms of behavioral psychology, because sitting and positioning that is an important thing. A number of religions also do not show a person. The mythical power has yet to appear in a number of Eastern religions. One of my personal favorites, this is the Dalai Lama sitting in a chair that was constructed exclusively for him. The chair was made by a very famous chair company. I forgot the name of the company, excuse me for that.
Was it Eames?
Stickley.
Oh,
Stickley made this chair, and they made exactly 100 copies of this chair, and they sold them for $10,000 each. So you could be a llama if you had the dollars and cents to be a llama. Uh, Here are two presidents that had special chairs. Clearly Franklin Roosevelt was 39 when he was stricken with polio. Our book club happens to be reading a great book by a woman by the name of Rebecca Tausig called Sitting Pretty, and it's about her life in the chair, the emotional life of being handicapped and having to spend a life in a chair with wheels, and the notion of how culture has to shift around her, and different people's responses to seeing somebody in a chair. And clearly Roosevelt didn't want to be seen in the chair, and publicly was hardly ever seen in the chair. Kennedy had this really horrible back, and it looked like comfy, cozy Americana, him sitting in his little rocker, but he was really in that rocker for therapeutic reasons. So that's another way of positioning. You know, here he is with this horrible back situation, but he's sitting in this rocker, which made him very available to the American public. When you get to the White House, you get to actually try on your own chair. And every chair that's brought into the White House for the try-on has to be purchased. So these 4 chairs during the try-on are actually, you paid for as a citizen of the United States for the president to try on his chair. He landed, I believe he landed on the one that's facing us in the sort of lovely brown color of that chair. So that's the Obama try-on chair. This is what I thought Trump would appear in when he was made president, but he didn't opt for that. I always used to think it was so funny to see him behind that tiny little table signing things in his chair. This was a very interesting, this is like in waiting. This is a chair in waiting, the little chair and the big chair, waiting for that moment of power. So the chair has a lot of, you know, the chair can move, and the chair takes on a lot of power positions that we can see in life. The birthing chair is on the upper left. You have 2 versions of the birthing chair. We have the, unfortunately, the electric chair, but it was done by a very famous print by Andy Warhol. The 2 chairs at the bottom lower right are the one, they were sold by Walmart for a number of years and only stopped recently selling them. They are timeout chairs for children, and they actually have pink ones for girls and blue ones for boys, but they have stopped selling these sexist chairs and these timeout chairs because they're not very useful. And you can pick them up now if you like. They are available on Etsy if anybody is interested in purchasing one of these timeout chairs for anyone you need to know. So chairs have a lot of power. Chairs have obviously purpose, and with it comes all kinds of behavior. In the world of design, there were 2 great pioneers in chairs. So there's been a lot of books written about the design of chairs. There's a whole library of chairs, chair books that you could find. The guy on the left in black and white is one of the pioneers of great design. It's Mies van der Rohe. And he was great architect out of Chicago, and he used to say it was easier for him to design a skyscraper than it was for him to design a chair because of the difficulties of body shapes and so forth. So here he is sitting in one of the chairs that he himself designed. He also went on to say designing a chair was, he said that Chippendale was more famous than he was because of the design of his chair than the design of a Mies van der Rohe building. The guy on the right in color is a guy by the name of Niels Diffriant, and he's sitting in what he designed as the Freedom Chair. It took him 8 years to design this chair so that it ergonomically fit his neck, his back, his lower back, his lumbar seat, the seat, and the hands, and all of it is adjustable to fit your particular body. And then we have the famous Eames chairs, the Corbusier chair, the Wassily chair, all kinds of famous chairs. And this to me is one of the great chairs of all time. It's the cheapest chair that you possibly could buy almost anywhere in the world or get thrown out and pick it up. It's called the Monoblock. Technically, that's the name of it. I call it the ubiquitous chair because it is everywhere, in all kinds of colors and shapes and molds. And pretty soon we'll have 3D printers that could print these out at home for ourselves. So there's this chair, this monoblock chair is actually in the Victoria and Albert Museum. It's gotten to be so fantastically popular. Here we have the famous folding chair that was designed by the Egyptians. They had the first folding chair. When we get to literature, I'm going to discuss something, tell a little story about a folding chair. Chairs also, not only do they have power, but they're worth a hell of a lot. And I'll get to that in a minute. These are just some of the chair books that you'll find out there. There are tons of them. And the chairs, there's an index in Dow Jones, which is an index for the cost of furniture and home furnishings, not the house itself, but the actual furnishings. And the prices of furnishings have actually increased an awful lot. But even though that we've had a democratization of home furnishings, but there's also an antique index, which I'm going to look at some of these numbers. Some of these chairs that I'm going to show you now have increased in price, in value. This one is a chair by somebody by the name of Pouvet. And this chair increased 512% its value over time. Another chair by the same. This Macintosh chair, some of you may be familiar with, very famous chair, increased 63%. And one was recently sold for $85,000 at auction, just the chair. These on the upper right, upper left, I'm sorry, in black and white, is the loop chair that was designed by the wonderful Francis Elkins. And I've actually done a series of loop chairs that's hanging in the gallery now. But these loop chairs, you see one that's a side chair and an armchair, but a set of 8, 6 side and 2 arm were sold for $65,000. You have Heather Locklear sitting in this very famous 1960s egg chair that was used in a L'Oreal color ad. And that chair has tripled in price to $79,000 that you can pick one up. Yeah, so in the design world, there are a lot of chairs. In the theater world, the chair is used also as a symbol and as a prop. This is the play, The Chairs, literally, a play by Ionesco. And the two characters, the old woman and the old man sitting end to end, discuss the 4 characters in the middle that aren't there, but they are chairs. Clearly the one in the center is a couple, and then you have a couple of oddballs there. And they go through the entire play having conversations with these chairs who are meant to be the people taking place in the production. George Hargeman was a friend of mine. He was an editor at Vanity Fair. He also was an alcoholic. and he went into rehab many, many, many times. And in the sort of quasi memoir that he wrote called Bettyville, Betty being his mother, and he went home to live with her a number of times. He wrote about being in therapy, and in the therapy, he had to actually, they would set up chairs and you would talk to the chair. You would tell the chair, supposedly the person in the chair, not the chair, you would tell that person exactly what you wanted to say, but however, never had the opportunity to be able to say that. So the chair became, again, a symbol of something that you can interact with, and was used in his therapy. I miss George. In art, just a quick little look here for the famous yellow chair that appears. I think everyone's pretty familiar with this Van Gogh. And we have from the Hours, the chair in the Hours, and it's a very famous empty chair. And below, a scene from The Godfather. The Godfathers kept changing. However, the chair never did. So the story goes on and on and on, and they kept, after sequel after sequel after sequel, bringing back the famous chair. In all of these stories that I have here, whether it's Snow Falling on Cedars or Tennessee Williams writing about chairs, you do get a sense of the importance of the chairs in these stories. In the Tennessee Williams book, there's a story that Williams writes about his father, and it's called The Man in the Overstuffed Chair. And he discusses the decay of the chair. It's very, very, very powerful. He writes about the fabric being sadder than the color blue that it is. And the empty chair has a big role in Snow Falling on Cedars. And I threw up a copy of Odes to Common Things here because Neruda spends some time discussing the chair. So we've seen the chair now in design, we've seen it in theater, we've seen it in literature, we've seen it in art, we've seen it in finance. It actually, this is a bit of a survey of seeing how the importance of that chair is almost a thread through our lives. And speaking of our lives, I don't know if you all remember, but I remember playing musical chairs in school. And I think it's really sad that somebody gets left out because there are just one child too many for the chairs that go round and round. So if you're not quick enough, you don't get the chair. I hope that's not a metaphor for some poor child's life for the future. And then, of course, there's the story of the three bears and the chair that gets broken. So the chair, is formative. It's a symbol that's in our early lives. And our television life. Now, this isn't a chair. This is where I took a certain liberty to bring up Big Bang Theory, because Sheldon Cooper actually sits in the same place all the time. And if you've ever watched the show, you can't sit in that corner of the couch, ever. He says, Penny, that's where I sit all the time. That is his chair. If we move along, we get to Friends, and the chair in Friends is named Rosita. And the chair that I just adore is the chair Martin Crane, Frasier's father, sits in Frasier, which, here's this very elegant apartment, and he brings in his chair, which is a mess, and it has tape on the edges of the armrests. So that chair is present as a big, that's the elephant in the room all the time on Frasier. Then we, of course, have Pee Wee Herman and his cherry chair, who he literally sings, "Hey Cherry, I love to sit on you," but we won't take that further for our discussion today. And these two chairs are in the Smithsonian. The upper right-hand picture you see a piece of glass in front of them. These are Archie Bunker's chairs, Archie Bunker's chair and Edith's chair. And they really tell a very powerful story of this working class guy whose last literal seat of power is that chair. Nobody could sit in the chair. And he is the archetype of this white guy in a changing world. And poor little Edith with her little dainty chair next to her. So, you know, the Neruda poem, Asking for Peace, I went down when I started working on chairs and doing art related to chairs. I couldn't help but go down this rabbit hole of what chairs meant in terms of symbolism and all of that good stuff. Here we are in the land of music. And we have Kenny Chesney, and the song was Old Blue Chair. And he sings in the song that whenever he has to go think about something, he will go and sit in this old blue chair. And he somehow gets the answer if he's sitting in that old blue chair. And this is a really popular song. So chairs have provided us with places to work. And as I said to people, can tell their story in 3 chairs. Here's my story. I never sat in a chair that was my size until I went to Public School 93 on Story Avenue in the Bronx when I was 5 years old, and sat in this chair, and it was the first time my feet ever touched the floor. So this is my school chair, which I purchased from some site, not exactly, online, because I needed to have that chair as an object in my life. These 2 chairs actually are in the show at Bethany. And it's a big painting that hangs on a wall, but I got these 2 chairs. I saved up money for my first paychecks, and I bought these chairs for my first apartment. And when my mother came to the apartment and looked at the chair, she said, "Someday you'll have a little money, you'll get them covered." So I took the chair and I started to make slip covers. This is my Chanel cover, and this is my fuzzy cover, and they're in the show. The chairs and the slip covers are there. I've made a seductive sheer black slip cover. I've made a white cloth slip cover. If I had more chairs, I would have brought them in. I have a sheer negligee type cover for it as well. There are any number of slip covers that I've made for these chairs over the years. So those are my chair stories. And I've heard a lot of phenomenal chair stories. I gave this lecture, a similar lecture, to students in the theater graduate program up at Yale. And they were talking about, one guy said he remembers sitting on a chair and it breaking. And then so the next day he went on a diet. And so, you know, everybody has some sort of story about chairs. Oh, here's the monk cloth one and a sheer one. I didn't realize it was in here. This is my chair. This is the chair in our house. This is also a big painting that Doug sits in when he meditates. But chairs, you know, they could be soft and cozy and welcoming, or they could be hard. And they could be facing away. So position of where they are in the picture. We looked at some pictures in a class today that Jill gave on painting, and seeing people from behind was very, very interesting, sort of looking over their shoulder with their back turned to you versus a portrait facing you. Interesting. We look at a picture like this and the chair is on its side, and it raises the question of what happened. Did the wind blow it over? Was there a fight? And so positions of chairs backed away, talking to the chair, having a conversation. The upper left is sort of like COVID, and the lower right is post-COVID, I guess you could say. So I'm going to end with a bunch of these little sketches that I made. A lot of them are actually in the show as well. And just open this up for any questions if anybody has about chairs. So that's it. So I don't know if you're unmuted or questions. Also, I wanted to note, oh, someone said, do I have a favorite chair? I do have a favorite chair. I actually love sitting on that little hard wooden chair. It's still my favorite chair from kindergarten, from PS 93 Story Avenue in the Bronx. There's something sort of delightful. Also, wood is soft as opposed to metal. I really appreciate soft wood. For everyone, Jill also does a great talk on chairs. I've seen her slides for her chair talk, and it's really quite marvelous as well. Any other questions or statements that anybody wants to make about the chair? Oh, I see a chair coming. Chandrika, a chair, her favorite chair. Does anybody else have favorite chairs?
When I was younger, in my grandma's house,
Rochelle?
Yeah.
With two little chairs. And that reminded me of that. So I had to get it and finish it.
Oh, by the way, there's also a picture of Chandrika. Let me see if I could do this. I want to show this one picture of Chandrika. This is a great picture.
I only realized that it was so apt after I saw today's topic.
Yeah, here it is. This is a picture of Chandrika sitting at a bench in Valparaiso. Am I correct? And that is the Neruda bench that she is sitting on, the Neruda bench in Valparaiso.
Can you share your screen so we can see it?
Oh, thank you. I will try. I don't know if I could do it.
There you
go.
Yeah. Here we go. Isn't that cool?
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that.
That's great.
It's great.
That's at Bethany too now.
Yeah, I print, Chandrika, I hope you don't mind, I printed out a small copy of it because I thought it was so amazing. I had never seen that, and it was incredible. Now, there is word that Neruda was a bit of a ladies' man, but I don't know if he's been 100% forgiven for his behavior, but he certainly was an amazing diplomat and poet. But that's sort of the story of chairs, and in the show, there are a lot of kids paintings, a whole section from the Ossining Children's Center. And there are some great pictures of portraits that they did showing emotions, and they write words that go with it. And there are big blocks of their writing on the floor. And it's really quite wonderful to see the children's artwork. And Abby will give you a whole calendar of events that are coming up, starting with Friday night with Jill. So Abby, I'm gonna turn this back to you.
Sure.
I want to just say something.
Yeah.
Rochelle?
Yeah.
So have you ever actually found a chair that you think is comfortable? I mean, in my whole life, I have never found any furniture that I can sit on for any length of time. I mean, I'm sitting here right now and I've got like this pillow behind me. I've got this like sitting thing I'm sitting on, and then I'm sitting on this chair that's supposed to be, like the chair.
There
the
is-
designer chair.
There is a chair. This is going to strike everybody as very strange, but there's a chair in my studio that's a very short, low chair, and it's on wheels.
Right.
And it's a plastic chair that's usually used by mechanics when they go underneath cars, because they have to be comfortable. They have to be able to lean back and to lean forward in that chair. And it's so you're close to the ground, but you can move around, still be in your chair, get up easily. And the thing costs $38.
Oh, yeah?
Send
me a link.
It's a mechanic's chair. It's a mechanic's chair. And I just love that chair.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think I've never found any furniture that I could say I could sit in for any length of time.
Well, go back to Mies van der Rohe. You said it was the hardest thing in the world to design.
I get it.
It's a chair. Easier to design a skyscraper than to design a chair.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
One of the things I find really fascinating is how the whole character of the whole mood of a room, formal versus informal, really depends on how the chairs are. They kind of catty-cornered toward one another, which is more friendly and intimate, or are they straight on? I mean, when you really look at the chairs in a whole room, a room with nobody in it, you really have a sense of what that room is about or what it's supposed to be about.
A friend said, once the party is over and everybody leaves, don't move the chairs, because people have figured out how to create community that way. So I thought it's a bit of a mess, but it's really interesting to see how people will move chairs to have conversations, to be with one another in that room. And I thought it was a great solution. I really did. So, it's like, you could say I'm obsessed about the subject, but the subject holds so many different thoughts, whether it's economic, whether it's design, whether it's religion, whether it's a business power play, how it appears in the theater in terms of creating emotions. The chair is one of those things in life, like the other 23 things that Neruda wrote about, that we just use in our lives. But if we stop and think about them, it's really interesting to think about all of those ordinary things in the table, the shape of that table, whether even French fries and our relation to it, whether it's guilt or enjoyment or connoisseurship. It's like, I love French fries. And, for me, McDonald's was the best French fry I ever had, I thought, until someone told me, don't eat them anymore. But it's really great how he was able to. Mark Strand, another great American poet. Well, Neruda wasn't American, but Mark Strand was a poet laureate in our country. And he used to translate a lot of Neruda. And he said that he felt that the greatest thing was the passion that Neruda put into his poetry about ordinary things. You could feel the passion. He didn't just talk about them, he loved them. So it's really interesting.
So Rochelle, I can see your next show, which is going to be a series of photographs after the party of where the chairs are and what it says about us post-COVID and about our relationship to each other. And it's an interesting thought, is to look at those chairs after the pack.
After the party.
Everybody.
Hey, you've even got your show title, After the Party.
After the party.
Exactly. So Rochelle, do you have the Neruda's chair poem handy?
Handy? Not handy. I'm
Not
sorry.
handy.
Not
Oh,
handy.
okay.
But you could find the poem in English and Spanish at Bethany, because I did all 24 poems in English and Spanish, and they're on the table in the Neruda room or on the wall in the Neruda hanging. You could find the poem there. So I encourage people to just, go. It's wonderful at Bethany. I call it my, like it's the creative magnet of the community. It really draws people in the most wonderful and safe and protective way.
Oh, well, thank you, Rochelle. We think that's the case. And Bethany was definitely created with the idea of being a safe place for people to come together and experience art and learn about art and see art that they wouldn't see otherwise. So I'm glad that you feel that when you're here. And I also want to thank you because we are, we're called Bethany Arts Community for a reason. We really do want to be a community, and part of that means really looking to our community for the kinds of programs that are going to go on here. And so everything that we're doing in Poetry Month, really, you were the spark for that, right? I think you called me up in August, September timeframe and said, well, there's a Poetry Month. And, you had an idea of the exhibit, and we started talking, and now here we are in our first ever celebration of Poetry Month at Bethany. So thank you for that. And as you said, of course, we currently have your exhibit as well as an exhibit of work from children from the Ossining Children's Center, which is really great fun and a reminder of how much actually we can learn from children. So I encourage everyone to come and see that. And then also, as you said, we have a series of talks and workshops and readings that are coming up. I'm not going to read all of them, but this Friday, we do have Jill's collaborations, Words and Images, which is Friday night at 7:30. And then we have a 4-week series that Jill is teaching, or called When Arts Collide, which is exploring for examples of how experiences are born when art and literature collide. We have a poetry reading, and then followed by a workshop, which is an interpretation of the real poetry and photography with all right, I can speak. Rachel Eliza Griffiths, Marcus Jackson, Ian Haley Pollock, who's an Ossining resident, and also David Flores, who's a photographer. And so I encourage people to look at the website and register for that. And then in the last week of April, we will have 7 poets with us here in residency for the week in our first ever poetry residency. And we have another poetry workshop and a reading associated with that. So I hope folks will check out the website, come on over, see the exhibit, keep me and Bonnie company. And with that, I think we'll say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you, Rochelle. That was great.
Glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you, Rochelle.
Take care.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Bethany.